Architects love the look of stone fronts on joinery, but often they don't know where to start with the design. The truth is, there are only 3 variables that you need to pay attention to, and often one detail that's the silver bullet. Over the past 6 years, we've built stone fronts into several 6 and 7-figure joinery packages, all with varying details. And in this video, we're going to go through the challenges with stone fronts, our solutions, and a decision-making framework you can apply to your next project. As always, if you want to see the project notes I'm looking at right here, then click the link in the description or in the top pinned comment. Let's start by going through the 3 challenges with stone fronts. Number 1, door thickness. If the door becomes too thick, it hits the limitation of the hinges and therefore the door can't open, or it will need really big door gaps or fillers for it to work. Number 2, the door weight. If the door becomes too heavy, then the hinges or the drawers will be under too much stress and they might fail. And number 3 is the door strength. We have to make sure that we're not compromising the strength of the stone itself because we do not want it to break or crack. So this is how we think about the problem. The thickness is actually the highest leverage opportunity. If the stone that we're working with can be thinned down, we reduce the weight of the door as well as the thickness, which gives us better hinge capacity. So really, this is that one silver bullet, which is the best option if the stone can be thinned down. The second factor is the weight of the stone. And if we can reduce the weight of the door, less weight over time means less stress on the hardware, which gives greater longevity for the product. It makes it longer lasting. And thirdly, we can't add too much risk in the manufacturing process or design the stone fronts in a way that bring in the risk of the stone cracking or being damaged over time. So these are the 3 things that we're considering as we're designing a solution, which brings us to our stock standard solution for stone fronts. So where possible, we're going to use that silver bullet and thin down the stone. Like we said before, it massively reduces the weight of the stone and it reduces the overall thickness of the door. Number 2, we want to use a thin door substrate. So that's the piece that the stone is glued onto that I'm highlighting there. We like to use a 12mm thick substrate for one very specific reason, and that's because they can accommodate the 12mm boring depth of Blum hinges. So in this picture, we can see a door which has a piece of stone which has been thinned down to about 15mm and a door that is 12mm. One way of thinning the stone down is on the saw. We cut many different cuts on the back of the stone and then give it a polish to reduce down the thickness. Here is one of those doors open with a thin front on a 12mm substrate. Now, the third thing, especially for doors, not so much drawers, is we need to be careful which hinge we're using. If the door is relatively thick and we don't want a massive filler against the wall, then we need to use a Blum 95-degree profile hinge. That lets us keep a tight gap to the wall while still having a relatively thick door. Now, if we don't have a wall running perpendicular to the door, that's where we can use a Blum 125-degree thick door hinge. Now, this is the better hinge because it can accommodate thicker doors with smaller door gaps. But the one area where it lacks is it is not suitable when there is a perpendicular obstruction. Now, the problem with our stock standard solution is that some stone is too hard to thin down. Some quartzites, some really hard granites are just too dense to be thinned down, either because the material is too hard or we run the risk of the stone cracking because it will lose too much of its structural rigidity. But for drawers especially, a 20mm thickness will still work fine. On this island unit, the drawers have been thinned down to 15, but on this vanity unit, for example, they are kept at 20. When the stone can't be thinned, the problem is that the doors will be thicker and we're going to need larger door gaps to accommodate the thickness of the door. Second problem is that the doors will be heavier and it will impact the functionality and the longevity of the joinery unit. Again, two more examples of 20 mil thick fronts on some vanity drawers and a living room unit. Here's another cool way, which still requires thinning down the stone, that we haven't done before, but I think is super cool. This is where we take a piece of stone, that's the blue, and then we thin out, so we pocket out this section on the back to allow for that substrate to be inserted in, and making sure that we cut around the hinges for the 35 mil hinges to be able to slot into the door as well. Now, what this does is it lets us do an overall 20 mil thickness. If the stone is 20 mil thick, it still reduces the weight, and we can retain a 20 mil depth for our finger pulls if they're finger pull drawers, which is a little bit more ergonomic. So the deeper this is, the more of a finger grip we have versus a shallower 15 mil depth. There isn't a single clear outcome for this. This is more of a information-based decision-making framework. We need to tailor a solution to every job, depending on the stone, depending on whether we can thickness it down, depending on the application, whether it has a perpendicular obstruction or not, the type of hinge we're using. So there's all those factors up there that we discussed. So what we've done is we've created this stone door decision-making framework, which helps you decide what direction you should be going in, as well as this matrix that you can use to help make those decisions as well. Now, in this process, the one thing that we have learned is that there often isn't a clear catch-all solution. But if we can create a framework or a system to help us reach that decision every time, that is also in itself very, very valuable. Another detail that I know architects often contend with is how to deal with stone supports on large island bench overhangs. Now, we have a perfect video for that if you want to see how we designed this island bench to support a 900 mil overhang.